Got it.
Good morning, everyone out there who might watch this in the future. And for the guys in the group, welcome to Global Resources for Men. I am Elysia Buss, and of course, today we have the great pleasure of getting to have Nils and Elzenga. We're laughing because we knew I was going to mispronounce his name. But Nils is coming to us from Amsterdam. He is a coach, a public speaker, and a writer. He came out with the Balkan Blues recently, talking about his journey of healing his relationship with his father after the early death of his mother. He has an incredible online training group for men called the Embodied Masculine. He is a facilitator of Breathwork, and something interesting that I'm really looking forward to hearing about, which is the circling, which is a relational meditation technique. And Nils just does so much in regards to helping facilitate different healing modalities and helping the people around the world. Nils, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
You're very welcome. Nils and I connected over a year ago when we first started talking about the different global men's summits that I was creating. So I'm glad that we were able to circle back and have him here in the group after all of this time. Nils, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Wow, how far do you want me to take that back?
What we could start something as easy as what was the spark for your evolutionary process when it came to personal work?
One starting point that's very significant for me has been the death of my mother. I was 17 and in high school at the time, and she had a very I guess death is heavy in most cases, but she succumbed to a very rapidly growing form of brain cancer, which was it was very like a traumatic experience, and I didn't quite realize it at the time, but it really dissociated me from my feelings. So essentially the shock was too big, all the shutters went down, and I just went into survival mode and kind of launched myself into the world. I finished high school a year later and just left sort of the burning ruins of what had been my family and just went into the world, which was beautiful in a way, like to sort of go into the world as a young man and explore and study and find new roots in a different city, Amsterdam in my case, and all that. But all that trauma has just been locked in my system, and that kind of came out when I was 25 and graduating from university. I was about to sort of hit the labor force, and I had no clue what I wanted to do, actually. Like, I studied history and I was kind of clueless, and that's when, and it wasn't a coincidence, of course, but that's when depression hit. Like, I got really depressed, and at the time it really felt like, where's this coming from? Like, I was really disoriented by the experience and by the intensity of the depression. And now I can see that this was basically my feelings just knocking on the door and saying, hey Nils, there's some stuff you need to process. And so in a way, I could summarize the next 15 years. I just turned 40. So this was when I was 25. I could kind of summarize the next 15 years as just me, exploring firstly sort of the more classical psychotherapy. I was on antidepressants for a while, which helped actually to stabilize, but then I went kind of into what they used to call sort of the spiritual world. I think they're merging now, like yoga. When I started yoga 15 years ago in Amsterdam, was very esoteric. Now it's obviously all over the place, like like coffee places. And so I started exploring all these modalities and finding kind of my groove, learning throughout the years that the trauma is very relational. So what I did, it's funny, like, I think we all have a certain character structure, which is basically conditioning and trauma. And then from that character structure, we kind of do things. And my thing was, I'll do it alone. Like, one of my survival things was, I'll do it alone. So, okay, I'll go into healing, but I'll do it alone. So what do? I do Zen meditation, like, sitting with silence by myself. I'll do, yoga, which you do by yourself, etc. Whereas actually my wound was loneliness, and my wound was, struggling with intimacy and letting other people in, because, if I let someone in, to my heart, I also have to open the whole thing. And that's also where all the pain sits. And I'm actually terrified of doing so. So over the years, I kind of discovered it's like, hey, shit, there's a strong relational element to this thing. And, enter circling, which I'm happy to explain everything about, enter breathwork, which I'm now facilitating as well. I train as a breath worker because it just really opened up my system in ways that like talking couldn't. Enter psychedelics as well. Like I've had tremendously powerful experiences with ayahuasca, with LSD, with mushrooms, and just really, like searching, and in that way also like finding actually my life path, because that's in my way, that's the beauty of the whole thing, how trauma can also, sort of in hindsight, that was actually, you used the word spark. Well, this was actually the spark that kind of put me on my path, which is now becoming more and more clear that this is actually my life path, and sort of the unfolding of myself, the deconditioning, the throwing off of like more and more layers of conditioning, becoming, it's a cliche, but becoming more and more myself, like feeling myself better and better and better, and becoming kind of lighter as a person. That's very much where I'm at right now.
Thank you so much for vulnerably sharing all of that.
Welcome.
We talked a little bit beforehand about the power of revealing things and being your radical authentic self. Do you want to talk a little bit about like that journey of when you were first stepping forward and sharing, and like how other men might be able to be empowered and find resources to do such things?
For sure. Like for me, revealing myself authentically as best as I can, because this is a gradual process,
for sure.
is, I would say, if I had to name like one sort of central element to what I'm doing and how I'm trying to live, is that it's like this radical honesty and really opening up about who I am. And I found out like how important this is through actually how scared I was of it. So there's this thing of like, if you're really scared or you're really resistant to something, it's like, don't turn away from it, turn towards it, because that's actually where there's a lot of gold to be dug.
Right.
That's at least been my experience. So very afraid of opening up, hence, facing it. And the gradual like thawing, I would say, of my system, actually, just reconnecting to everything below my neck really has been like the healing. The healing is in the feeling, as they say, right? This is not mine, by the way, I nicked it, but I think it's a very beautiful saying. And so I don't want to generalize, like I don't think you can generalize, but I see men struggling with this a little more on average than women. So in the circles, let's call them spiritual circles for lack of a better description. Sure. I'm always like, since I started yoga, meditation, all these things, I'm always surrounded by, an 80% majority of women. And it's getting better in the sense that more and more men are kind of, doing the work, so to speak. But when I was starting yoga, I was like an anomaly as a guy. And so,
did the women ask you oftentimes if you were gay?
Well, I've been like, not specifically in spirituality, for some reason, like I've been, people think I'm gay. Have been thinking I'm gay, for as long as I can remember.
Interesting.
Which I don't know, might have something to do with like being sensitive or open, or I don't know. But
I just thought that was interesting, because sometimes there's stereotypes when you walk into fields like that where you're the only man in like a group.
Yeah. No. I mean that's been coming at me quite a lot. I happen to be straight, but yeah, I don't know what that is. Something I think with a certain sensitivity that I've always had, and I'm. It just got buried under a lot of like armor in my case, and Yeah, I think a lot of guys struggle with this. And I'm still sometimes like, how to explain this? I think women, at large or by and large are maybe more connected to their bodies because of their cycles, for example.
Sure.
So they're just this, kind of like, oh, every month this whole thing happens in women's bodies. Therefore, I better, but for a man, that's different. And I think there's a lot of cultural luggage here as well, where, boys don't cry. I mean, that just kind of sums it up. And as much as we think we're past that, that's still so ingrained in our, in our educational system, in my epigenetics, in my cultural sort of, the cultural collective, etc. So for guys to kind of open up and become vulnerable with their feelings, is just, it's like three bridges farther than for women, at least from what I can see.
Yeah.
And there's another element to it as well, is that guys are different than women, so they might need a different way of like being with each other or being with other people. It's not like everybody has to open up in the same way. Like there's I think a specificity to sort of the masculine expression of that, but yeah, I do believe deeply that we're all relational beings, and we all need connection as actually, food, sleep, connection. It's that important.
Yeah, I agree.
I believe that a lot of the, depression, a lot of the alienation that we see around us has to do with this thing of like, we're meant to live in groups, in tribal structures. And here we are like floating around in sort of postmodern industrial societies, like asking ourselves, like, where do I belong? And that quest for belonging, I see it so often around me, and it's deeply in me as well. It's like, where do I belong? Like, I'm all sourcing this from my own experience, right? Like the archetype of the wounded healer, where I'm like, oh, everything I'm actually, you teach best what you need to learn most, that kind of thing. Yeah
There's so many things there.
Yeah, I know. I have to like every now and then stop talking to kind of rest a little bit, but there's a lot there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of multiple intelligence theory.
I've never heard of that.
So multiple intelligence theory talks about how people process information differently in 9 different veins. So for instance, you have people who are more mathematical, others that are more visual, kinesthetic, nature-based, interpersonal, intrapersonal, musical, etc. So it's how, like, for instance, 2 people could agree on something, but because they process information differently, they're expressing it differently. So they actually are in disagreement because they can't relate to one another, even though they agree on the concept. And so that's why you have people like arguing in circles, and they're just like, you don't understand, you just don't get it. And it's just like, well, and then if you take a step back and you try and explain it in a slightly different manner and really look at it from somebody else's point of view and collaborate, and maybe even try and have both of you explain it in a third fashion, then you might get to a result that you're looking for. And that's like the male and the female too. It's just like, well, we process things differently. It's like, well, yes, we do. And then we also have like the 5 love languages and different attachment styles and different sensory processing aspects. Like some people are more sensitive of how they literally process information. Things can be too loud for one person, or physical pressure like touch can be too much for a person. And how do we articulate our needs and really honor where we're at? I think it all really comes down to communication and letting go of ego and letting go of expectation.
I'd highlight the first one, actually, just communicating where you're at, like as a skill and as a practice. Because who I was a year ago is not who I am today even. So there's this thing, for example, like as the more I unfold, so to speak, the more sensitive I become as well. And that's sometimes problematic. Like where I used to be able, to enjoy a night out at the bar, now it's like, wow, just this cacophony and like of drunk people, and I just can't be in that energy anymore. And then I'm like, what is this? Like I used to enjoy this. So that's just me as an individual kind of traveling through age. And so even there, and then continuously to articulate for myself and for my loved ones, like, hey, this is actually happening for me. How's that for you?
I love that second part too, is just like, what's happening for you?
I mean, communication is relational, right? So there is always the curiosity for the other as well. It's not just me. Otherwise it becomes, which is, it's a tricky thing, but sometimes it can become puking, like, I'm just puking all my story onto you, and then you're like, okay, but do you even see me? And that I've been in that pitfall as well, I think. And so it's always like share and receive. Like it's definitely a circular reciprocal thing.
Absolutely. And also asking the person beforehand sometimes, do you have the bandwidth for me to share this with you?
Yeah.
Or are you interested to, oftentimes would be like talking about something and then somebody just gives you a bunch of unsolicited advice.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it seems like you have a problem. There's something I can help you with. Let me fix it. Let me help you, instead of asking first, hey, like, I hear this. Is this what you're wanting? Do you want advice? Do you want help in this moment? Or do you just want to talk to me about your thoughts and have me listen, and then I can share about whatever else I want to in my life? But it's not necessarily a time for a bridge on this particular subject.
Yeah, I think that's one of the first kind of shifts that I made and that I see people make as well, as they kind of, sharpen their skill of communication, is like the distinction between, advice and just being with, or reflection, where advice quite often actually is unsolicited and therefore irritable. Like, why are you trying to fix me? That's usually underneath. Like, I don't need fixing. I just need to be seen and heard, essentially. Like, I just right. And then if I'm just there, like, that's usually enough. That's a funny sort of, I don't know, like it's a paradox at the center of this thing, where I'm like, if I'm just fully present with you, that's so much more powerful than me, listening to you, processing here, and then coming with, oh, you could do this, or, maybe you could go there, or maybe you go talk to, and you're like, but are we actually, are we resonating in a very real sense? Because that's what happens when you become present to each other.
Do you find that occurs more with men and women, or with men like talking to each other in regards to like trying to fix it and the unsolicited advice in either direction?
I don't know. Like, there is this this thing about mansplaining, right? Where apparently this is something guys do. I think, I'm not sure, like, there might be something in men that wants to kind of explain, but I think that's coming from I don't know, like from a bit of an ego place, or a place of insecurity, or like a sort of a paradigm that we're leaving behind us, or that we definitely need to leave behind. Like, if I look in the circles that I facilitate and stuff, I really don't see that much of a difference. Eventually, actually, when I'm really like going into my full presence as much as I can, other people do, then a lot of the differences fall away anyway, between genders, between ages. What you're left with is this realization, at least for me, is like our compatibilities, or our similarities, are so much bigger than the differences. And I think the human mind somehow, it's like, focusing on the problem instead of the solution. It's like we're focusing on the difference instead of on the similarity, whereas actually, or focusing on the triggers between us, whereas actually 98% is love. And we just, as we're connecting, and we just kind of miss that, because we're so trained as well, actually, by the educational system, of like a problem solving, testing, grades, all that kind of stuff. Is just like, but actually, let's just drop in here, and then see how similar we are. That's how I feel about it anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was curious from the standpoint, like, if there were any cultural differences, with you being in the Netherlands versus like the experiences that we have in the United States.
Oh yeah.
And the conditioning there. And I was thinking, not necessarily from mansplaining, although I do hear about this mansplaining thing, but I think that that's oftentimes just humans. But because I don't think it's necessarily mansplaining, but also like fixing. I think there's a difference between somebody like caring and being like, oh, hey, I have these ideas of how to fix it, versus mansplaining, and which in my mind would be somebody just assuming that you don't know anything and that you're stupid, and you're like over explaining something that the person had told you they already did or something like that, I guess.
Yeah, I think what you said earlier is quite crucial and elegant when you're just naming things, right? So you're naming, hey, I think I might have, some advice for you. Are you open to receive that?
Yeah.
Right. And then you just give the agency to the other person, and they are free to to receive that or not, and that's it. And then then you've kind of solved that.
It takes it all away.
Yeah.
For either gender, it doesn't matter.
Another question of culture, fascinating for me, and yes, definitely there is like big differences, and they're often funny, to be honest. Like Dutch people, for example, are known, right, to be rude and direct, which is just how we relate. So that happens. I'm facilitating a lot of circling, which is like a lot of Americans, a lot of British people in there. And so British people, for example, are known to be super polite, right? So a lot less direct than us. And sometimes that leads to like
friction.
Yeah, like these funny situations where I just say something that comes across as perfectly normal for my cultural standards, but for a British person, it's like I just punch them in the face and like, whoa, way too direct. And then, but that's always beautiful material to then, if you're in a space where everybody is there with an intention to connect, then this is beautiful material to work with.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun.
Yeah,
part of what I love about getting to go into other places and discover different cultures, because of just how people interact, and it's fun. So tell me a little bit more about the attached aspect, because we've gone through relational, and I think that really dives beautifully into the attachment theory. And
like, so as I explained earlier, I think gradually I started realizing that the problem, quote unquote, that I was facing is very relational. And to make that a bit more concrete is like I struggled in intimate relationships. Like I used to attract partners and then, go a certain length with them, and then reach a point where they were like, hey, but I really need, to feel you more. I really need to feel your heart. And then I was like, yeah, me too, but I have no idea how to enter there. And that was very, very traumatic, honestly, because that often eventually led to a breakup, or me, having all these exit strategies, and me really, really like looking back on it, really like strategizing to keep, the woman that I loved in that time, at a distance. It was super painful stuff. And then I came across this book actually called Attached. It's a very hands-on book, and it's about attachment theory. And this is a new field in psychology that basically studies attachment styles. Like for me, this was like a revelation. Like I'd never heard of such a thing. And somebody recommended me this book. I open up this book and I just read the whole thing, and it was like, it's rare. It happens sometimes where you find so much recognition in a book. It's like you're reading your own biography, and it's just this huge relief of like, oh my God, there's actually a name for this, and there's more people, that have this, and there's solutions, and there's, like a whole field of psychology dedicated to this stuff. So for me, it was a huge relief. And then, so yeah, very short, there's 4 styles of attachment, right? So one is safe, which is half of the people approximately, and they're kind of okay with getting intimate and really committing to a relationship. But then there's the 2 other quarters, like, so 50%, another 25% is anxious, meaning, they cling. So, and then there's avoidant, and that's me, and they push away, right? So guess what? Anxious and avoidant often attract each other, in this like vicious cycle of the one becoming more and more clingy, and the other becoming more and more like, avoidant, right? And that was the dynamic that I often found myself in. And then the fourth one, it's only a couple percent, is anxious avoidant. Then you're really fucked in a way.
So it's oscillating between the two. You're like, I love you. Wait, hold on, too much. But I'm
yeah. So yeah, me being avoidant, and this is all like, how do you become sort of, avoidantly attached? It's all like childhood stuff. And I almost hate to say it because it sounds so cliche, but the more work I do, the more I'm like, again, I'm gonna have to look in my early childhood, because there's so much that originates there. And in my case, that was definitely the case as well, where I just very unsafe environment as I was growing up, my early years, a lot of fighting between my parents, a lot of emotional absence, a lot of depression in my parents, and all trauma, blah 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 blah, a whole sort of clusterfuck situation that led me to become avoidantly attached later on. And I found out a lot about this when I was researching my book Balkan Blues, which you referenced. It's available only in Dutch, unfortunately, but it's about my family history. So I was researching all that stuff, and like all these nickels dropped. How do you call that in English? All these, like, I had all these revelations about, oh my God, this is where it's coming from. And that was they didn't quite solve the pattern or the dynamic yet, but it definitely always starts with an awareness on, okay, this is what the pattern looks like, and this is where it's coming from. And once I have that awareness, now I can work with it, right? But that's something I find quite vicious in sort of the human psyches, that so much of that stuff is actually, buried somewhere in our unconscious, and we can't even touch it and work with it. And that's again where modalities like breathwork or psychedelics can be really powerful, because you just enter that space that normally you just don't reach. At least in my experience, again, because that's actually something I really want to underline, that I can only speak from my own path and my own experience, but this has definitely been my experience.
Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah, I really recommend that book to people.
I read it this year. It was life-changing for me as well. But I'm definitely more of like an anxious attachment style. And so I have experience with you, avoidance.
Yeah. Hey, we agreed you wouldn't mention that.
Oh, so funny. Yeah, no, it's a really beautiful journey, and to like own that, where you're at is a really humbling experience, and but really, really healthy and important. And then to be able to articulate that to your partner and say, hey, when you see me doing X, don't take it personal, just communicate to me.
Yeah, well, that's actually that in itself, me or anybody for that matter, being able to communicate what's happening is already life-changing, because I'm still avoidant. Like, I still have these tendencies where sometimes I tend to to close down. I tend to sort of become silent. I tend to sort of energetically withdraw, etc. But now, like, I have this amazing tool of like telling my partner, it's like, hey, I think this is happening. So, and just so you know, and then that makes all the difference in the world. Because if I become silent on you without you knowing, that's terrifying for people. But if I say, hey, listen, I'm with this thing, like I'm struggling here a little bit, like I'm trying to connect, but I'm a bit just, I don't know what's happening, but just so you know, then that makes all the difference in the world. And from that sort of, again, that thawing, like doing that over and over and over again, I'm experiencing that I'm more and more able also to just to open my heart, to open my I guess it's my heart, actually. That's where, like, I keep coming back to
No, that's beautiful. For me, as an anxious attachment style, just the communication, if I have someone who regularly communicates to me, it takes me to secure. Like that's just like, it totally
Yeah.
deactivates my anxious attachment, and just be like,
Yeah.
okay, like we're fine. Like I know where I stand. You just tell me.
Yeah.
I tell people, I'm like, I'm the easiest person in the world to deal with if you just communicate with
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. But I think what you just said, you're speaking for countless people, on the planet. And actually that's what I'm discovering over and over again as well. It's like the most powerful stuff is the most simple. Because, when you strip away all the context, like this is very simple stuff. It's just okay, so where you're at, and then you communicate that, and then I say, that impacts me in, such and such way, and this is where I'm at, and that's the practice in a
Yeah,
nutshell.
it does take practice, and people having faith that the other person isn't going to attack them reactively, either physically, verbally, like emotionally, like any of those things.
Yeah, which is an important disclaimer here as well, is like, it does take two to tango. Like I've made that mistake myself where and maybe you did as well, I don't know, but like, coming
Oh,
out of
sure, I'm human.
yes, yeah. Yeah, but like coming out of a let's say a week-long retreat, and then being super blown open and all connected, to spirit and source and my fellow human beings, and then really like hitting default life, like hitting the normal world, and being all open, and just people not being receptive to that, and then being very, that's a very painful experience. So it's also, yeah, you have to kind of make that distinction, or make that evaluation, like, is my authenticity, is my vulnerability, is my heart welcome here? Will it not be trampled on? And that is a very real decision to make for each person, for themselves. I think you kind of start speaking about boundaries there, which are another like very important topic.
Absolutely. Boundaries are incredibly important, and also understanding where people are at in social norms. I've
Yeah.
talked to this in different contexts before about how, like a group of guys who are in the military, like the Marines or whatever, your social norms of what's acceptable in that context is not necessarily going to be the same if you go and you're in church,
Yeah.
right? Or if you're at the office, or if you're
Yeah.
with like family and little kids.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that you're not being your authentic self each time you go into each of those areas, but you have to understand that there's those set context of social norms of what's appropriate and acceptable. And if you
Yeah.
go into that area, you're agreeing that like you're going to play within those. Or if you don't agree and you decide to just be like a reckless bull in a china shop or whatever, that there will be social repercussions for engaging in that, because you will create discord
Yeah.
and breaks in communication and affinity and reality, like all those different things.
Yeah. Again, this is very, it's a bit of a tightrope walk, I think, where of course, if I go into a situation and I start staring at people because I really want to connect, and that's not welcome, that might create like very awkward situations, at best. But on the other hand, sometimes cultures might need to be changing a little bit as well. Like, so there's also sort of this human evolution towards what I believe towards more openness and more connection, and so yeah, it's also kind of like leaning into the edge of the discomfort sometimes a little bit. Say with my father, for example. Like, I know my father's a very different generation, very different upbringing, very different trauma. Coming, his father was a prisoner of war during the Second World War, so there's been a lot of like trauma there. But I can still kind of like try and meet my father where he's at, and sort of not completely play his game and not connect whatsoever. So, but if so that's, again, that it's a bit of a dance with him, like where I'm just using him as an example.
Sure. I think it's
Whereas,
about like creating a healthy gradient
yeah,
in communicating about like where somebody at, and
yeah,
on any given day a person's bandwidth can be larger or smaller.
Yeah.
Okay. So if somebody is feeling really great that day and you can ask them, hey, like, I'd like to have this conversation. Are you in a place where you can have that conversation? And if they say
Yeah.
yes, because they've got a lot of bandwidth, then you can have more of a conversation and dive deeper and push the envelope a little bit more at a greater gradient that day. But if somebody's had a really rough day, their kids have been screaming all day long, they're tired, they're hungry, and you're just like, hey, I want to do this thing, and their bandwidth's really small, like, that's probably not the day to try and like push the envelope a little bit, right? So it's about honoring everybody's space.
Yeah, I think I'm coming back to, again, sort of the skill of communication. Like, what is communication, and how do we do it? Because this has been, a lot of people talk about, like, and I happen to agree that it seems like in education we learn a lot of stuff, but just not the things that really matter, right? like how to communicate, or how to be a good human being, or how to deal with your finances, or just all these life skills. Where do you learn that? Like, a lot of people didn't learn it in their family. You don't learn it in school. So where do you learn it? And then if we're not careful, we then start like chastising ourselves, like whipping our own backs with like, oh, I can't communicate, and like blah blah blah. No, of course not, because you've never learned. So really, enter compassion and enter mildness towards the self, and towards everybody, actually, for that matter, who's just like groping around in the dark, trying to find their way. I listened to this teacher the other day who spoke about the emotional dark ages. Like, we're in the emotional dark ages as a species, and it's like, it's very meta maybe, but I it's like, it clicked. It's like, it's true. We're a super young species, and we're just emotionally immature, most of us.
It's so interesting.
Yeah. And I include myself in that. Like, I'm not saying I'm like all mature now or something, but I'm
You're maturing. It's a process. It's an evolution.
I'm trying. Yeah, at least I'm trying to mature. Definitely. That's yeah. Yeah.
That's funny. No, I feel it, because I mean, like, I just turned 41 last year, so I'm in the same sort of like time frame as you.
Contemporary.
I love being in my 40s. I don't know what like these midlife crisis things are all about. Maybe I just did mine early. But we're coming close to the end of the hour. I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about your Embodied Masculine program and anything else that like you want to bring to the surface in this last little bit of time.
Yeah, so as we are, I guess, in a group of men, this seems pretty apt. So this is a training I put together for men specifically. The Embodied Masculine. The masculine is in all genders, just to be precise, but it is a training for men, people that identify as men. And I put this together for men because I feel that it's really important for men to come together. And I really missed this myself in my own life. Again, I'm sourcing this for my own self, where I think I've never had like, potent examples of strong men in my own life. And I see this a lot around me. So what I'm trying to create here with this training is just, like a strong container of men on the path, so to speak, really coming together, in brotherhood, in vulnerability, and really just, coming forward in a way that is exploring authenticity, realness. What is it like to be a man these days? Because there's a lot of confusion around that, for sure. So it explores all these topics, and I've really like put in all the potent tools that I've come across over the last 15 years. And so it's a jam-packed program. I feel it's really, really powerful. Like I've run it twice now. This is going to be the third time, and like I've really gotten amazing feedback from the guys that were in those trainings. So it's opening on October 2nd on a Saturday. I'm hosting free calls for guys interested. So, find me in the show notes. Is that how you're saying it on
in the show notes? Yeah, but you can also tell us right now, like, where could they find you for anybody listening?
So it's actually just theembodiedmasculine.org. So www.theembodiedmasculine.org. That's the website of the whole thing. You can book a call there. You can book your spot there. You can read all about me, all about the program. Everything basically you need to know about this program is on that website. I just maybe suffice to say here that we're starting on Saturday, October 2nd.
Awesome. Well, Nils, thank you so much for everything that you've offered here today. The hour went by super fast, as it oftentimes does. Yeah. And I hope that some of the guys take advantage of your fantastic program.
Hope so too. Thanks again for having me. It was it's like you said, I feel like we've been talking for 10 minutes.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you. And for anybody out there who's listening who'd be interested in connecting with me for connection coaching with men, with women, etc., or if you're interested in being hosted on the show as a guest, please do contact me at www.globalequineaffiliates.com, and you can book a free discovery call there, or just hit me a DM. So thanks again, everybody, for watching, and until next time, we will see you later. Bye.
Yeah.